Chapter 8 of Free Air. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Free Air by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 8. The Discovery of Canned Shrimps and Hesperides. On the morning when Milt Daggett had awakened to sunshine in the woods north of Gopher Prairie, he had discovered the golden age. As mile on mile he jogged over new hills without having to worry about getting back to his garage in time to repair somebody's car, he realized that for the past 2 years he had forced himself to find contentment in building up a business that had no future. Now he laughed and whooped. He drove with one foot inelegantly and enchantingly up on the edge of the cowl. He made Lady Vere de Vere bow to astounded farmers. He went to the movies every evening, twice in Fargo, and when the chariot of the young prince swept to the brow of a hill, he murmured, not in the manner of a bug driver, but with a stinging awe, "All that big country, ours to see, puss. We'll settle down some day and be solid citizens and raised families and wheeze when we walk, but all those hills to sail over, and come on, let's sail." Milt attended the motion pictures every evening, and he saw them in a new way. As recently as 1 week before, he had preferred those earnest depictions in which hard-working, moral actors shoot one another, or ride the most uncomfortable horses up mountainsides. But now, with a mental apology to that propagandist of low-browism, the absent Mac, he chose the films in which the leading men wore evening clothes, and no one ever did anything without being assisted by a man. Aside from the pictures, Milt's best tutors were traveling men. Though he measured every cent, and for his campfire dinners bought modest chuck steaks, he had at least one meal a day at a hotel to watch the traveling men. To Claire, traveling men were merely commercial persons in hard-boiled suits. She identified them with the writing up of order slips on long littered writing tables, and with hotels that reduced the delicate arts of dining and sleeping to gray greasiness. But Milt knew traveling men. He knew that not only were they the missionaries of business, supplementing the taking of orders by telling merchants how to build up trade, how to trim windows, and treat customers like human beings, but also that they, as much as the local ministers and doctors and teachers and newspapermen, were the agents in spreading knowledge and justice. It was they who showed the young men how to have their hair cut, and to wash behind the ears and shave daily. They who encouraged villagers to rise from scandal and gossip to a perception of the great world, of politics and sports, and some measure of art and science. Claire, and indeed her father and Mr. Jeff Saxton as well, had vaguely concluded that because drummers were always to be seen in soggy hotels and badly connecting trains and the headachy waiting rooms of stations, they must like those places. Milt knew that the drummers were martyrs, that for months of a trip, all the while thinking of the children back home, they suffered from landlords and train schedules, that they were Claire's best allies in fighting the great American frying pan, that they knew good things, and fought against the laziness and impositions of people who kept hotel because they had failed as farmers, and that when they did find a landlord who was cordial and efficient, they went forth mightily advertising that glorious man. The traveling men, he knew, were pioneers in spats. Hence it was to the traveling men, not to supercilious tourists in limousines, that Milt turned for suggestions as to how to perform the miracle of changing from an ambitious boy into what Claire would recognize as a charming man. He had not met enough traveling men at Schoenstrom. They scooped up what little business there was and escaped from the Leipzig house to spend the night at St. Cloud or Sauk Center. In the larger towns in Minnesota and Dakota, after evening movies, before slipping out to his roadside camp, Milt inserted himself into a circle of traveling men in large leather chairs and ventured, "Saw a Gomez Dep with a New York license down the line today." "Oh, you driving through?" "Yes, going to Seattle." That distinguished Milt from the ordinary young men loafers, and he was admitted as one of the assembly of men who traveled and saw things and wondered about the ways of men. It was good talk he heard. too much of hotels, and too many tight, banal little phrases suggesting the solution of all economic complexities by hanging agitators, but with this, an exciting accumulation of impressions of Vancouver and San Diego, Florida, and KC. "That's a wonderful work farm they have at Duluth," said one, and the next, "Speaking of that, I was in Chicago last week, and I saw a play." Milt had, in his 2 years of high school in St. Cloud, and in his boyhood under the genial but abstracted eye of the old doctor, learned that it was not well thought of to use the knife as a hod and to plaster mashed potatoes upon it, as was the custom in Mac's old home lunch at Schoenstrom. But the arts of courteously approaching oysters, salad, and peas were rather unfamiliar to him. Now he studied forks as he had once studied carburetors. And he gave spiritual devotion to the nice eating of a canned shrimp cocktail, a lost legion of shrimps, now 2,000 miles and 2 years away from their ocean home. He peeped with equal earnestness at the socks and the shirts of the traveling men. Socks had been to him not an article of faith, but a detail of economy. His attitude to socks had lacked in reverence and technique. He had not perceived that socks may be as sound a symbol of culture as the cello, or even demountable rims. He had been able to think with respect of ties and damp peak collars secured by gold safety pins. And to the belted fawn overcoat that the St. Klopstock banker's son had brought back from St. Paul he had given jealous attention. But now he graduated into differential socks. By his campfire, sighing to the rather somnolent Vere de Vere, he scornfully yanked his extra pairs of thick, white-streaked yellow cotton socks from the wicker suitcase and uttered anathema. "Begone, ye unworthy and punk-looking raiment. I know ye. Ye werst a bargain, and 2 pairs for 2 bits. But even as Adolf Zolzac and an agent for flivver accessories are ye become in my eyes, ye generation of vipers, ye clumsy, bag-footed, wrinkle-sided, gunny-sacking ye." Next day, in the woods, a happy hobo found the manna-bringing ravens had left him 4 pairs of good socks. 5 quite expensive pairs of silk and lisle socks Milt purchased, all that the general merchant at Jep had in stock. What they lost in suitability to touring and to private laundering at creeks, they gained as symbols. Milt felt less shut out from the life of leisure. Now in Seattle, say, he could go into a good hotel with less fear of the clerks. He added attractive outing shirts, ties neither too blackly dull nor too flashily crimson, and a vicious nail brush which simply tore out the motor grease that had grown into the lines of his hands. Also he added a book. The book was a rhetoric. Milt knew perfectly that there was an impertinence called grammar, but it had never annoyed him much. He knew that many persons preferred "they were" to "they was," and were nervous in the presence of "ain't." One teacher in St. Cloud had buzzed frightfully about these minutiae. But Milt discovered that grammar was only the beginning of woes. He learned that there were such mental mortgages as figures of speech and the choice of synonyms. He had always known, but he had never passionately felt, that the invariable use of hell, doggone, and you bet left certain subtleties unexpressed. Now he was finding subtleties which he had to express. As joyously adventurous as going on day after day was his experimentation in voicing his new observations. He gave far more eagerness to it than Claire Boltwood had, gustily intoning to Vere de Vere, who was the perfect audience, inasmuch as she never had anything to say but "meow," and didn't mind being interrupted in that. He clamored, "The prairies are the sea. In the distance they are kind of silvery. No, they are dim silver. And way off on the skyline are the islands of the Now what the devil were those islands in the mythology book in high school? Of the blessed? Great snake's boots, you're an ignorant cat. Very. Hesperides? No. Hesperides. Yea, Bo. Now that man in the hotel. May I trouble you for the train guide? Thanks so much. But how much is so much?" As Claire's days were set free by her consciousness of sun and brown earth,